Right, welcome back, and thanks so much for being with us on Morning Live. And we continue paying in this hour tribute to the former great Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda, who passed away. Now, the incumbent Zambian President Edgar Lungu has declared 21 days of mourning following the death of the former president.
So he died at the age of 97 in Lusaka yesterday. Kaunda led Zambia into independence from Britain, ruling the country from 1964 until 1991. Tributes have poured in from past and present leaders across the continent.
Former President Kenneth Kaunda was born at Lubwa in the then Northern Rhodesia. The youngest of 8 children of a Church of Scotland minister, Kaunda was a teacher by training, like his parents before him. He was at the forefront of the struggle for independence, first joining the Northern Rhodesian African National Congress in 1951. 8 years later, he broke away from that party and founded the Zambian African National Congress, which was banned and resurfaced as the United National Independence Party, UNIP. Kaunda became president of that party. In a landslide victory, he became Zambia's first president at independence from Britain in 1964. He ruled the country for 27 years.
Nelson, this is like my team here. Yes, let me just come here.
Kaunda was all his life a Pan-Africanist, an opponent of the apartheid government and Ian Smith's white minority rule in southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe.
Many famous figures have visited this country during the last 2 years. But none who is so close to our hearts as KKE. This is the man who has hosted our organization and our Congress during the most difficult years in our struggle.
KK, as he was known, has had his fair share of critics. He called for multi-party elections in 1991, in which the opposition leader, Frederick Chiloba of the Movement of Multi-Party Democracy, won elections. Kaunda attempted a political comeback in 1996, but was barred on constitutional grounds.
Tiende pamozi limuti maumo, tiende pamozi limuti maumo. Africa tiye, joloke limpopo limuti maumo. 2 wrongs can never make it right. Discuss with the leaders, white leaders in South Africa, the problem of land. Discuss with them, let them know what's taking place, what has taken place elsewhere in other countries. Let them know that the situation here is very serious. But they should remember, as we should remember, we black people of South Africa, 2 wrongs never make it right anywhere on earth.
In his later years, the elderly statesman dedicated his time to charity work, particularly the fight against HIV and AIDS, a disease that he publicly announced had taken one of his sons.
Sons of Africa, rise and fight. In the name of great Africa, we shall fight and conquer AIDS. Girls of Africa, rise and fight. Girls of Africa, rise and fight. In the name of great Africa, we shall fight and conquer it. Forward ever, backwards never. In the name of great Africa, we shall
Sophie Mgweni, SABC News.
We shall fight and conquer it. We shall fight and conquer it. In the name of great Africa.
And to further reflect on the life and the legacy of this great statesman, we are joined by Advocate Sipho Mantula, researcher at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Studies at UNISA. Advocate Mantula, thanks for speaking to us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Refreshing morning, Sister Sakina. Jambo Africa to the viewers across Africa from Zambia to South Africa.
Oh, Jambo to you too. Now, as we reflect on the legacy of this really great statesman, you know, what do you think is what he will be remembered most fondly for?
You know, Sister Sakina, when President Thabo Mbeki yesterday interviewed by Dandora said we should not talk about remembering him actually. We should move in his footsteps and in his vision of seeing Africa being free from corruption, from diseases. I was thinking deeply that 18 years ago when I met him at VETS, there was another project done by the Boston University, by the way, which was looking at the former heads of state. And one thing that I think we'll remember him now as we are on the issue of the land question across the African continent, he was critical on the question of the land of Zimbabwe. When he was sharing with us about why there was this the issue between Britain and Zimbabwe, and why his friend, the late President Robert Mugabe, was so critical around it, even if at a later stage he did lose that plot because there were military veterans who were grabbing their land. And I think another aspect that we will remember him or will walk in his thinking path is the issue around conflict resolution and mediation in the African continent, looking at the crisis that is going on in the region, whether it's Mozambique, whether it's Mali, whether it's Chad. And I think in the COVID situation that we are in, he was the champion of epidemics, hence that insect of HIV/AIDS gives us this thinking now of the COVID-19 that we are in. And I think that's where we'll remember KK for and we'll walk in his footpath.
At times also rather unpopular with some of the African leaders, especially if you think of at a time after he spoke out against some of the leadership styles, clinging to power. As you just mentioned, he was an activist against HIV and AIDS when it was still very much a stigma. So again, did not mind getting in there and really getting down and dirty with it at a time when it is even now unpopular seemingly to do so.
Definitely, Sister Sakina, remember the moments. Let me rewind the cassette and take you to the script of 2017 when he went to meet with his friend once more, Gushungu Gabriel Mugabe. He was very critical on him, saying, but look at the time. You are running out of time. Resign. You look at the crisis of Laurent Kabila, the father of Joseph Kabila, during the crisis of the DRC 19 years ago. He was critical as well. You look at the role that we saw in this country, South Africa, when it was going down. He was always there to support our liberation movements, whether the ANC or PAC, but he was critical. And I think his power of being an elder statesman to can engage openly, that gave us for him to have lived almost for 97 years. And I think this is very rare to find a last surviving member of the founding father of the frontline states. Because when you think of him with Julius Nyerere, with Robert Mugabe, with others from even other regions of Africa in the 1963. And for me, Sister Sakina, what lives with me, it is his picture where he's with Miriam Makeba. You know, that picture again gives us KK outside politics into culture and music. Because I think our leaders, we will always want to redefine them through political lens, when actually culturally we can. Hence, humanism, his philosophy of humanism was critical. despite that others said, but it did not work economically. But historically, philosophically, humanism, Ubuntu, was critical during that time in Zambia in the late 60s.
And, huge sacrifices he made, if you think about the liberation from colonial rule, not just for his own Zambia, but at the forefront of liberating essentially every other country on the continent that had not yet attained independence from their colonial masters, and placing not only himself, but Zambia as a country at great peril, but having the courage to do so.
Definitely, but remember that Zambia, Sister Sakina, some of us as learners or as the scholars, we've been taught by lecturers from that country. If you look at their intellectual base, it was very rich during that time. And second, if you remember, he was once the chairperson of the Organization of African Unity. So he was able to pursue it at the OAU Liberation Committee. You look at his role of media, he was able to grant the ANC Radio Freedom the base to can operate what others will call clandestine radio station. So you can see the power of him again beyond Africa, because I think this morning we've been looking him within this African continent, but he was vocal even on the question of Iraq and Iran. He was vocal on the Middle East. So I think if we have to look at him broadly, he was a par-excellent elder who knew what are the issues that affect Africa, what are the issues affect South Africa. Hence, he was critical with Botha. Mosquito was never given the chance. When he was criticizing Mosquito, President Botha, he was critical on him to say engage with the liberation movements. Knowing that how Samora Machel was killed, he could never forget that. How Chrisani was killed, he could never forget that. So he knew when he was engaging with these apartheid leaders and colonial leaders that he could stand on the feet of the African unity and African solidarity.
And, you speak about intellectual prowess and paying much attention to that. And I can't help but bring up an institution like Fort Hare at a time like this, because if you look at the list of alumni of Fort Hare University, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Desmond Tutu, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, Robert Sobukwe, Kenneth Kaunda, Robert Mugabe, and this illustrious list of great statesmen that we've had on this continent at some point or another walked through the walls of that great institution, but maybe not so great. So what are we doing in order to preserve this legacy? Because just by reading those names, you would think that we would do everything in our power to preserve Fort Hare as an institution. And are we not already letting their legacy down by not doing so?
No, definitely. Actually, what we are doing, we are just doing what others will say, polluting, defiling the legacy of these elders, our unsung heroes and heroines. And I'm happy that you have raised the issue of intellectual legacies. How do we bring the knowledge base, universities, high schools, that the young people can cherish this knowledge that has been left by our elders? Because beyond Kenneth Kaunda is that we have to have more Kenneth Kaundas again rising from these institutions. I fully agree with you that Fort Hare as well, it now becomes our site of struggle, becomes the site of that luminaries have passed there. But what is it that university responds to the needs of the people of Eastern Cape, and as well as the young people starting to undertake research and document our leaders. And I think that's where Thabo Mbeki African School talks about archiving, documenting. And I think you'll remember, Sister Sakina, that when President Thabo Mbeki came with the presidential library project, this was one of the reasons that some of these elders, when they go to the graves, they go with knowledge. But we should be able to can capture them, document them, and use this knowledge on the issues that faces Africa, because I don't think we are just mimicking or we are just lamenting, but you are critically saying institutions of higher learning, you have the role to play. Media institutions, you have the role to play by bringing us those voices. Not only today, we need documentaries to constantly remind us and at the same time cause a heart attack to our former colonizers, because our former colonizers tells us, when we remember our elders, they will always tell us, Sister Sakina, there was a missed legacy of Kaunda. He was a one-party state. He had bent parties in his country correctly, but let's correct the history of our continent through the young people who can document and learn from our elders.
And so important, as you were speaking, I just Googled quickly alumni of Forte University, Seretse Khama, Ken Temba, Governor Mbeki, Julius Nyerere, Joshua Nkomo, and as I said, this is just such an illustrious list of people. So something needs to be done beyond just the rhetoric and talking about how we preserve legacies. But then, you spoke about a 27-year rule of KK in Zambia and mixed reviews on that, as one would imagine. But also, as one of the elders in later years, he continued his conflict resolution mediation post his presidency. Let's talk a little bit more about that and some of the instances where he was called upon to intervene.
Definitely. I think you'll remember that there's life after presidency. And like I said on my earlier clip, Boston University used to tap into this knowledge. But you'll remember first thing he did set up foundation and start to work on the issues. And the OAU and the AU by then used to call him as a special envoy in those issues of conflict resolution. DRC being the case in point, Zimbabwe as well, which President Thabo Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki yesterday confirmed it. You'll understand Mozambique crisis as well. And when you look even at the crisis of Sudan, when you look at the crises that are in the Sahel region, this elder was always being tapped into to say, give us your pearl of wisdom. And that's where we should cherish his thinking about conflict mediation, because we are still talking about silencing the guns in the African continent. And elders like KK are relevant and they are potent to the young people of today. And as well, as I said, multi-party democracy finally came through 30 years ago. And I think that's how we can remember, even if people say it was a one-party state, but 1991 now became another curtain for him to say that let's allow multi-party democracy. And I think that's where we can cherish the legacy of Kenneth Kaunda. As Africa, it is still seeking peace and justice in the broader continent.
Advocate Sipho Mantula, no doubt we'll be talking a lot more about Kenneth Kaunda in the lead up to, obviously, he is laying to rest, but we'll park it here for today. Thank you so much. Advocate Sipho Mantula is a researcher at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Studies at UNISA, and helping us there to reflect on the legacy of former Zambian President Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, who passed away yesterday. And, some of the fondest memories whenever KK was in the country, you should just see the excitement on the faces of journalists. Everybody wanted to get a glimpse of him because he was always just this wonderfully jovial and optimistic person, always running. And I think I remember the last time when let me speak for myself, saw him was at Madiba's funeral. And again, just that huge applause when he enters an arena, just to show who he is. And running up to that podium wherever he was. And we have lost as a nation, as a continent, and as a people of this world. Rest in peace, KK. And with that, at 7 o'clock, let's bring you the latest news. Leanne standing by.